On October 8, 2025, more than 100 feet underground, in a dark karst cave near Mount Rogers in the Appalachian Mountains, a group of cavers stumbled upon a discovery that made their blood run cold. In the dim beam of their flashlights, they saw a man, emaciated to the point of being a living skeleton, who was maniacally scrawling hundreds of incomprehensible symbols on the cold limestone walls. Instead of ink, he used his own blood from his fingertips, which had been scraped down to the flesh. This man turned out to be 23-year-old Russell Hood, a well-known vlogger who had vanished without a trace in these rugged woods exactly 3 years ago. The whole world had long since officially declared him dead, but he had survived, only to transform the absolute darkness of the dungeon into a chilling, blood-stained diary that concealed the terrifying truth about where he had been all these years. On October 12, 2022, 23-year-old Russell Hood, whose vlog about solo survival in the wilderness was rapidly gaining popularity and had over 700,000 subscribers, embarked on his most ambitious expedition. His destination was the Jefferson National Forest, a rugged, little-explored expanse of dense thickets, deep ravines, and steep slopes in the southwestern part of the Appalachian Mountains. According to the ambitious plan Russell announced during his latest live stream at exactly 7 a.m. that same day, he intended to veer off the official Appalachian Trail route near the town of Damascus, Virginia. His mission was to film exclusive documentary footage of extreme survival without any basic gear. He took neither a tent, nor a sleeping bag, nor any food supplies with him. At 9:30 a.m., a local farmer, 60-year-old Thomas Miller, drove Russell in his old pickup truck to the start of an abandoned forest road that had once been used by loggers. According to the interrogation report later compiled by a detective from the county's investigative division, the farmer was the last person to see the blogger in person. According to Miller's account, as reconstructed in the case file, the young man was in high spirits, joking around, and seemed completely confident in his abilities. He was carrying only a light backpack weighing no more than 10 pounds, a portable action camera, a spare battery, and a hunting knife. The temperature that morning was 45 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind was gusty, and the sky was heavily overcast with thick, gray clouds that foreshadowed a rapid drop in temperature. At 9:45 a.m., Russell recorded a final short video against a backdrop of yellowed trees. He looked into the camera, smiled, and promised his viewers he would check in exactly 3 days later as soon as he returned to cell phone coverage. After that, he turned off the device and disappeared into the thicket. When Russell didn't update his social media at noon on October 15th, and his phone kept diverting calls to voicemail, his family and thousands of followers began to sound the alarm. That same day at 3 p.m., his older sister officially filed a missing person report with the police. On October 16th at 8 a.m., the Virginia State Police, in conjunction with the National Park Service and the local sheriff's office, launched a large-scale search and rescue operation. A command post was set up in the parking lot near the start of the hiking trail. More than 80 people, including volunteers, canine handlers, and professional rescuers, divided the surrounding area into search sectors, each covering 2 square miles. People formed a chain, standing 50 feet apart, and slowly combed through the rugged, dangerous terrain. On October 17th, bloodhound search dogs, trained to detect the scent of the missing person's clothing, picked up a clear trail from the very spot where the farmer had dropped off the blogger. The dogs confidently led the rescuers through the thicket, but after exactly 3 miles, they came to an abrupt halt at a rocky cliff overlooking the steep, cold, white-top Laurel Creek. The drop here was over 60 feet. The dogs circled the spot in confusion. The trail ended so abruptly. as if the man had simply vanished into thin air. On October 18th, 2 National Guard military helicopters, specially equipped with powerful infrared thermal imaging cameras, were deployed to the operation. However, the dense canopy of the autumn forest, which had not yet completely shed its leaves, and the complex karst landscape consisting of countless deep ravines, rock overhangs, and hidden caves, made aerial scanning completely futile. Time was working against the rescuers. The weather took a sharp turn for the worse. Severe frosts set in overnight, and the air temperature dropped to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. A person's chances of survival without warm clothing and shelter were dwindling by the hour. The only significant breakthrough during the entire investigation came on the 20th day of the search. On November 1st, at 2:15 p.m., a group of volunteers exploring an area 5 miles off the main route came across an unusual object. At the very bottom of a dry ravine, overgrown with slippery moss, lay Russell's action camera. The device's casing was covered in deep scratches, and the plastic mount had been torn out along with the surrounding material, indicating the use of significant physical force or a strong impact. The camera was immediately sent to the Cybercrime Forensics Unit in Richmond. Analysis revealed that the last video file on the memory card was irreparably damaged. However, the file's metadata revealed a strange detail. It had been created on October 13th at 11 p.m., meaning Russell had tried to film something in complete darkness more than a day after setting out on his hike. The forest yielded nothing else. Not a single scrap of fabric, not a trace of a campsite or a fire pit. After a month of intensive but fruitless efforts, on November 15, 2022, the Sheriff's Office issued an official press release. The active phase of the search was wound down, and the case files were archived. Russell Hood joined the long, sad list of people who had gone missing in the vast Appalachian mountains. None of the detectives knew at the time that during their prolonged attempt to recover that same damaged video file, forensic experts had managed to extract just 1/10 of a second of the audio track, which contained neither the cry of a wild animal nor the sound of the wind, but rather the clear, heavy, metallic clank of a chain. On October 8, 2025, almost 3 years after the fruitless search operation, the forest revealed its secret. According to the criminal case file, at 2 p.m. that day, a group of 3 experienced cavers from a local club set out on an expedition. Their goal was to descend into an unexplored karst system located in a hard-to-reach area near Mount Rogers. This route required professional mountaineering gear, as the entrance was a narrow vertical shaft hidden beneath the massive roots of a fallen tree. The temperature on the surface was 60 degrees Fahrenheit, but underground it remained at 50 degrees with nearly 100% humidity. Using hundreds of feet of static rope, the cavers made their way deeper into the rocky labyrinth. As the group's leader, 30-year-old Mark Davis, noted in his report, the descent was extremely difficult. At 5 o'clock in the evening, having descended more than 100 feet vertically, the group squeezed through a limestone passage barely more than 20 inches wide. It was then that Davis noticed an anomaly. Ahead, where there should have been absolute darkness, a faint flicker of light was visible. A sound echoed from the depths, sending a chill down the explorers' spines. According to the interrogation transcript, it was a monotonous, raspy whisper that echoed off the damp walls of the cave. The sound resembled the rapid recitation of a list, interspersed with heavy, labored breathing. At 5:15 p.m., the speleologists emerged from the tunnel into a spacious stone chamber and froze in horror. In the center of the chamber sat a living person. The source of light was an old tactical flashlight, its battery barely holding a charge, casting eerie shadows. The light revealed Russell Hood from the darkness, though it was impossible to recognize the former 23-year-old young man in this creature. The man's physical condition bore witness to inhuman torture by starvation and isolation. His body was a skeleton covered in dirty gray skin, weighing barely 90 pounds. Instead of clothes, only rotten, mud-soaked rags hung on him. His long, matted hair and beard formed a solid, stiff shell. A pungent smell of ammonia and caked blood emanated from him. Yet it was his actions that were most shocking. The pads of his fingers on both hands had been rubbed raw to the flesh. Using his own blood as the only pigment available, he was maniacally scribbling thousands of symbols, layer upon layer, onto the pale limestone walls of the cave. Fresh, bright red blood layered over old, dark brown lines, demonstrating the continuity of this horrific process. There was no mysticism or chaotic delirium in the bloody frescoes. It was dry, factual information, a desperate attempt by a broken mind to capture reality. On walls covering dozens of square feet, fragments of Virginia license plates, schedules of freight train horn signals laid out to the minute, and chemical formulas for powerful sedatives were densely intertwined. Amid the frenzied torrent of disjointed data, one short name was repeated endlessly: Silas. Witness Davis attempted to approach the man. The reaction was instantaneous. Russell spun around abruptly, revealing sunken eyes that glowed with primal terror. He was in a state of the deepest dissociative shock. Without uttering a single word, emitting only muffled, animal-like sounds, he rushed toward the wall. The exhausted man spread his arms, trying to shield the blood-stained notes from the light of strangers' flashlights with his own body. At 5:40 p.m., Davis left his partners to guard the entrance to the hall and began an emergency ascent. It took him 45 minutes to reach the surface and pick up a faint satellite signal. After reaching the dispatcher, he reported the coordinates of the most chilling discovery in the county's history. But before leaving the underground chamber, Davis managed to take a few photographs. In one of the photos, in the lower corner of the wall, a fresh inscription was clearly visible, one that stood out dramatically from the others. It was precise geographic coordinates, pointing to a location many miles away from the endless forest. Dear viewers, before we continue delving into the details of this investigation, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and leave a comment. The platform's algorithms work in such a way that your activity helps promote the video, allowing more people to see this content. Your support is incredibly important. The evacuation of Russell Hood to the surface proved to be extremely difficult and took more than 6 hours. Given the man's critical condition and the complexity of the karst terrain, a special tactical team of mountain rescuers had to be called in. On October 9, 2025, at 2 a.m., an ambulance transported the rescued man to the intensive care unit at Johnston Memorial Hospital in Abingdon. A medical report, prepared by a doctor at 4 a.m. and attached to the criminal case file, documented the patient's catastrophic condition. According to the document, doctors diagnosed the 26-year-old man with end-stage malnutrition. He weighed less than 90 pounds. Blood tests revealed a critical deficiency of vitamins and minerals. In addition, the patient suffered from severe photophobia. According to the medical staff, whenever even a dim light was turned on in the room, Russell would instantly curl up into a fetal position, hide his face, and cover his head with his hands, emitting only muffled whimpers. However, what struck the detectives who arrived for the examination the most was something else. Deep, old scars were discovered on Hood's body, encircling his ankles and wrists in a tight ring. A forensic medical expert confirmed that the thickness and nature of the scar tissue unequivocally indicated that the man had been restrained for years with a heavy metal chain. Physical torture, prolonged isolation, and partial atrophy of the vocal cords had caused Russell to completely lose the ability to speak. Any interrogation at this stage was absolutely impossible. Meanwhile, on October 10th at 9 a.m., a Virginia State Police investigation team, together with special agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, descended back into the cave. Their goal was to preserve evidence. Forensic experts began taking detailed photographs and performing 3D digital scans of every square inch of the blood-stained inscriptions. The documentation process, carried out in conditions of high humidity and low temperatures, lasted 18 hours without interruption. Over 2,000 very high-resolution images were taken. The datasets were immediately sent via secure communication channels to the main forensic laboratory in Quantico. On October 11th, behavioral experts from the Behavioral Analysis Unit submitted their preliminary analytical report. After examining the photographs from the dungeon, the profilers reached an unequivocal conclusion. The blood-stained walls of the cave were not a manifestation of schizophrenic delusions or the result of a mental breakdown. It was a desperate, essentially ingenious attempt to preserve his sanity. Analysts determined that Russell had been held under conditions of severe sensory deprivation, in absolute darkness or under constant artificial lighting, completely depriving him of any sense of time and space. Driven into a corner, the former survival expert pushed his skills to the absolute limit. For years, his brain had methodically analyzed the faintest sounds, microscopic vibrations in the ground, smells, and random visual details that seeped through the walls of his unknown dungeon. After breaking free and finding temporary shelter in a cave, Russell was in a state of deep shock. He was terrified that his exhausted memory would permanently erase this vital information. With neither paper nor pencil, he recorded the details of his captivity in the only way available to him. The cave walls became a silent yet incredibly eloquent witness, the key to unraveling exactly where the hell he had spent the last 3 years was located. When experts at Quantico began sorting through the blood-stained symbols, identifying certain patterns, they stumbled upon a series of inscriptions that made even seasoned investigators shudder. The deciphered audio markers clearly indicated that all this time, Russell's secret prison had not been located in the remote forests of the Appalachians at all. Starting on October 12, 2025, the analytical team of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Investigative Division worked around the clock. In the laboratories at Quantico, dozens of experts transformed the chaotic, blood-written inscriptions from the cave walls into a structured digital database. It took hundreds of hours of continuous work to separate random smudges from meaningful text. It was painstaking work. Forensic experts deciphered each symbol, running it through recognition algorithms. Eventually, acoustic experts began overlaying the collected information onto a map of the state of Virginia, and the picture that emerged was shockingly precise. Russell Hood, while in the complete darkness of his prison cell, recorded an incredibly precise sound graph. One of the recurring daily recordings was a detailed description of a locomotive's whistle. Agents cross-referenced this frequency and schedule with transportation databases. The speed at which the sound traveled indicated a specific distance from the railroad tracks. It turned out to be a specific signal from a Norfolk Southern freight train. This train passed a particular section of the railroad every day at exactly 3:40 a.m. The second acoustic marker that analysts extracted from the bloody diary was the ringing of an old church bell. Russell documented that it rang exclusively on Sundays at 11 a.m. The third and most important sound, which the captive blogger described as a rhythmic, muffled thud, turned out to be the low-frequency hum of a heavy industrial press. According to the schedule on the cave wall, this press operated in 2 shifts. Modeling specialists used a spatial triangulation program. Overlaying the propagation radii of these 3 sound waves onto a map, narrowed the vast search area from thousands of square miles to a single small industrial district. The radius of intersection of these waves formed a perfect target on the digital map. It pointed to an area less than half a square mile in size. This area was located on the southern outskirts of the city of Marion. On October 15th at 10 a.m., the forensic investigators made another breakthrough. While analyzing photographs of the lower tier of inscriptions, they deciphered two key fragments of text. Amid the blood-stained lines, the words, "closed door with a red valve," stood out clearly. A bit lower down was a fragment of a license plate. Russell memorized the combination, which ended with the numbers 7 and 2. At 11:30 a.m., the investigators sent an urgent request to the Department of Motor Vehicles. The algorithm filtered registered vehicles in the county, matching them against the license plate fragment and the radius of the Marion area. The system returned a match. The partial license plate number belonged to an old Ford pickup truck manufactured in 1998. That same day, at 1 p.m., a heavy silence fell over the operations center. The investigators realized the terrible truth that undermined all their theories. Russell Hood had never been held in an abandoned forest cabin or a bunker somewhere in the wild mountains. For all those 3 long years, he had been in a soundproofed room not far from civilization. His prison was located near railroad tracks and factories, right next to people who went to work every day, unaware that just a few dozen feet away, hell was unfolding. The thought was horrifying. All that time, while large-scale search parties with dogs and thermal imaging cameras were combing through dozens of square miles of impenetrable thickets, the victim was right within the city limits. The cave where speleologists found the emaciated blogger was located more than 10 miles from the town of Marion. It had served only as his temporary hideout after an incredible escape. How exactly a man whose weight had dropped to a critical level managed to cover such a distance across rugged terrain remained a mystery. On October 16th at 8 a.m., teams of state police and plainclothes agents began a covert search of all abandoned and active industrial sites in a designated area of Marion. They were looking for an old pickup truck and a building that could serve as the perfect prison. At 4 p.m., the radio on a secure frequency suddenly came to life. One of the detectives reported in a hushed voice that he had found a rusty vehicle. Hidden behind a tall, solid concrete fence lay the gloomy grounds of a large industrial complex. And right in front of the closed gates stood that very same old car. It seemed as though they were finally on the verge of solving the mystery. But what awaited them behind those walls turned out to be more terrifying than anything they could have imagined. On October 17th, 2025, at 2 p.m., the attention of detectives and special tactical units was fully focused on a facility called Oak Haven Mill and Storage. According to the county's property records, it was a large, abandoned complex of an old sawmill and warehouse facilities, with a total area exceeding 40,000 square feet. Officially, this vast property had stood vacant since the year 2015, but exactly 4 years ago, a private individual purchased it through a shell law firm. Investigators from the financial division noticed a serious anomaly. Electricity bills, which were regularly paid through anonymous trust funds, indicated continuous consumption of a huge number of kilowatts, which was completely inconsistent with the status of an abandoned property. At 3 p.m., police reconnaissance drones, hovering at an altitude of 400 feet above the complex's backyard, spotted a rusty Ford pickup truck parked there. Zooming in on the high-resolution camera footage confirmed the presence of a dirty license plate, the last 2 digits of which were 7 and 2. On October 18th at 3 a.m., a special-purpose tactical unit launched a coordinated assault on the premises. The operation took place under conditions of absolute radio silence. creating an atmosphere of anxiety and mounting tension. According to the commander of the assault team, as reconstructed from his post-operation report, the perimeter was secured within 2 minutes. Flashbang grenades shattered the night's silence, and the massive armored doors of the main hangar were breached by a heavy hydraulic ram. Inside, however, an eerie emptiness reigned. The owner was nowhere to be found, and the spacious rooms, covered in a thick layer of industrial dust and cobwebs, seemed completely deserted. The soldiers spent nearly 1 hour methodically combing every square yard of the upper floors, but found only old, rusty machine tools. The situation changed dramatically at 4:15 a.m. While conducting a detailed scan of the basement level using portable ground-penetrating radar, the soldiers discovered a hidden cavity. Behind a false drywall wall, lined with a 12-inch thick layer of industrial fiberglass insulation, lay a massive steel door, firmly embedded in a reinforced concrete block. On it sat a large red water valve, snapped in half, a mandatory symbolic detail that had come to embody the mystery. It was the very same object that an exhausted Russell, with fingers rubbed raw, had maniacally etched into the limestone chronicle of his rescue in the cave. After breaking the heavy-duty lock with a powerful hydraulic cutter, the Special Forces soldiers entered and froze at the sight before them. According to detailed reports from forensic experts, beneath the old hangar lay a perfectly equipped, completely soundproof bunker measuring about 2,000 square feet. The thickness of the soundproofing ensured that not a single scream would escape to the outside. The walls of the long entrance corridor were completely covered with hundreds of printed screenshots from Russell Hood's videos. Each sheet of paper bore maniacal notes made with a red marker, calculated lighting angles, timestamps, the blogger's breathing rate, the exact coordinates of his movements, and an analysis of his voice timbre. In the central hall of the bunker, a horrific, surreal scene unfolded before the law enforcement officers, one that drastically changed the entire course of the investigation. The room was no ordinary prison. It had been transformed into a full-fledged film set. Using dozens of plastic trees, artificial rocks, tanks of stagnant water, tons of dry dirt, and real fallen leaves, the criminal had recreated, down to the smallest detail, the wild forest setting from Russell's most popular vlogs. High-powered professional studio lighting was set up around the entire perimeter of the room, and 3 expensive digital video cameras stood motionless on steel tripods, their lenses focused on a single point. The ventilation system relentlessly maintained a constant temperature of 50 degrees Fahrenheit, mercilessly simulating the cold conditions of an autumn forest. The air was saturated with the sharp smell of ozone from the lamps and dirty water. At the very center of this eerie installation, lying on the floor, was a heavy metal chain firmly attached to a steel ring cast into concrete. The chain was exactly 15 feet long, and the weight of each link made it absolutely impossible to break it with bare hands. Scattered nearby were pieces of rotten wood, primitive homemade tools, and gnawed bones of small animals. The investigators instantly realized the true scale of the madness. The kidnapper wasn't just holding the famous extreme sportsman captive in a damp dungeon. He had forced the exhausted young man, chained with a heavy chain, to act out gruesome survival scenarios in this artificial forest on camera for years. It was a personal, twisted reality series created exclusively for a single viewer who ruthlessly directed every move of his tormented victim, dictating when to sleep and when to build a shelter. Forensic investigators began collecting physical evidence, methodically photographing every inch of the set. At 5:30 a.m., one of the detectives from the Cybercrime Division approached the director's console, hidden behind thick, soundproof glass in the adjacent room. On the table stood a massive computer server connected to the cameras. The hard drives were still humming quietly, indicating that the system was active. The detective gently touched the computer mouse, waking the 3 huge monitors from sleep mode. What flashed onto the screen was not just a folder containing thousands of saved video files. Pulsing on the screen was an open program window with a countdown timer and a flashing red message that revealed the maniac's horrific plan for the next 48 hours. On October 19, 2025, the best specialists from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Cybersecurity Division began working at the crime scene. 8 powerful computer servers were extremely carefully removed from a hidden basement bunker, the air of which was still saturated with the smell of ozone and despair. In addition, forensic experts discovered more than 20 external hard drives containing a total of hundreds of terabytes of encrypted data. Analysis of this unprecedented digital trail, which took exactly 48 hours of continuous, grueling work by a team of analysts, made it possible not only to identify the maniac, but also to piece together, minute by minute, the terrifying mechanism behind his meticulous planning. The prime suspect turned out to be 42-year-old Silas Moore. According to his employment history, he was a former senior sound engineer at one of the region's prestigious television studios. According to former colleagues, whose testimonies were promptly documented by the police during cross-examinations, Moore had been fired 3 years earlier due to progressive mental disorders, pathological social withdrawal, and unpredictable aggressive behavior in the workplace. His search history, which agents managed to recover from the cache of deleted browsers, astonished forensic experts with its cold, inhuman, and methodical obsession. In the year 2022, a few months before Russell Hood's official disappearance, Silas began fanatically studying every video by the popular vlogger. Using professional studio software for frame-by-frame analysis and image processing, he analyzed all available footage. Experts determined that Moore had repeatedly zoomed in on the reflections in Hood's sunglasses. He meticulously calculated the angle of the sun's shadows cast by trees at different times of day to determine the exact latitude and longitude of the location where the footage was shot. But the maniac's most terrifying and effective tool was his professional, perfectly trained hearing. As a top-notch sound engineer, Silas broke down the audio tracks of each video clip into separate frequency channels. He isolated and highlighted the barely perceptible sound of wind rustling through the treetops in the background, measured the frequency of the elevation changes in invisible mountain streams, and, what impressed the investigators most, the specific songs of rare bird species. Ornithologists involved in the investigation confirmed that these particular birds migrated only through very narrow, specific corridors of the Jefferson National Forest during clearly defined weeks in the fall. By piecing all these disparate natural markers together, Silas Moore calculated, to within a few dozen yards, the very same secret route that Russell had planned to keep absolutely hidden from the rest of the world. According to a psychological profile hastily compiled by Bureau specialists, Silas Moore suffered from an extremely severe form of parasocial schizophrenia. He perceived Russell not as a living, independent person, but as his own personal content, as digital property that was meant to belong exclusively to him alone. Hundreds of hours of video footage found on encrypted drives, filmed directly inside the soundproof bunker, shocked even the most hardened investigators. The high-resolution color footage captured in detail how Silas, through a hidden loudspeaker mounted under the ceiling, issued orders in a monotonous, emotionless voice. He forced the extremely exhausted Russell, chained with a metal chain, to start a fire by rubbing his hands together directly on the cold concrete floor, rubbing his hands raw until they bled. In other recordings, the captive was forced to spend hours building a perfect shelter out of artificial plastic branches under the blinding, unbearable light of studio spotlights. All that could be heard on the tapes were the kidnapper's dry, brutal commands and the victim's heavy, labored breathing. Russell acted out these chilling survival scenarios for a single, deranged viewer, becoming a powerless actor in the most terrifying reality series. But the perfect criminal isolation developed an unexpected crack. On October 21st at 9 a.m., national television networks, breaking the police's strict embargo on information, published an official statement announcing that Russell Hood had been found alive and was currently under heavy guard at a hospital. This unexpected media leak proved fatal to the covert capture operation. The cyber police quickly intercepted footage from surveillance cameras at a small gas station located 50 miles from the Marion Industrial Zone. The color footage, taken at 9:15 a.m., clearly shows Silas Moore standing at the register, paying for gas. According to the cashier's account, as reconstructed in the police report, the customer behaved completely calmly. Suddenly, he looks up at the wall-mounted TV screen, which is broadcasting a breaking news special featuring a photo of the rescued blogger. The camera captured the suspect's face instantly turning pale, his features contorting into a grimace of animal panic. He throws a few crumpled bills onto the counter, turns abruptly, and dashes out of the store. A surveillance camera captured Moore jumping into a dark SUV, which, according to the database, had been stolen the previous evening. The maniac realized the worst. His perfect studio, meticulously crafted over the years, had been exposed, and his only actor had escaped and was now testifying against him. A large-scale, unprecedented manhunt began. All exits from the county were immediately blocked by reinforced checkpoints, and patrol helicopters were scrambled. However, when at 10:40 a.m., a highway patrol finally spotted the wanted SUV, abandoned on the shoulder of a deserted mountain highway, there was no one inside. The driver's door was wide open, and a portable radio lay on the dashboard, broadcasting intercepted police communications. The operative's gaze immediately turned to the dense, impenetrable wall of trees in the state park, where fresh boot prints led, unambiguously suggesting that the real struggle for survival was only just beginning. On October 23, 2025, operational data clearly indicated the direction of the fugitive's escape. Around 10 a.m., a highway patrol discovered an abandoned, stolen SUV on the shoulder of Mountain Highway 58. Tread marks from heavy hiking boots, which forensic experts immediately documented on the damp soil, led directly into the remote, extremely inaccessible areas of Grayson Highlands State Park. Special units of the United States Marshal Service, as well as combined tactical teams from the Virginia State Police, rushed to the scene. A tense, life-threatening game of cat and mouse began in the rugged terrain, whose total area far exceeded 4,000 acres of wilderness. The park's landscape was a treacherous labyrinth of jagged rocky ridges, deep gorges, and dense thickets, where visibility sometimes dropped to 10 feet, turning the search into a veritable hell for the operatives. Silas Moore had never in his life been a professional hunter or a seasoned hiker, yet he possessed one terrifying, unnatural advantage. For 3 long years, he had spent hours every day observing Russell Hood's actions in his dungeon. The maniac forced the captive expert, time and again, to demonstrate the best techniques for survival, covering his tracks and setting intricate traps. Moore literally absorbed all the skills of his tormented victim, using a layer of cold river mud to conceal his heat signature, and moving exclusively along the rocky beds of dried-up mountain streams. He successfully avoided any visual contact with armed law enforcement officers during the first 48 hours of the pursuit. On October 25th at 7 a.m., the situation took a sudden turn for the worse. One of the experienced fighters in the Special Forces Advance Unit suffered a serious injury to his right leg. According to a detailed police report, the officer stumbled upon a tripwire made of thin steel wire, skillfully concealed beneath a thick layer of rotting fallen leaves. The mechanism instantly released a massive oak log, which struck the man with incredible force, knocking him off his feet. Experts who later examined the mechanics of the contraption were shocked. It was an absolutely exact, flawless replica of a trap for large predators, which Russell Hood had designed and explained step by step in his video back in 2021. The pursuers realized clearly that they were not hunting a panicking amateur, but a phantom who cold-bloodedly used the forest as a deadly weapon. The climax of this mountain operation came on October 26th at 6 p.m. Thick black clouds gathered over the mountain peaks, bringing with them a sharp drop in temperature. A violent autumn storm broke out, with gale-force winds reaching 40 miles per hour and a piercing, icy downpour. Silas Moore, taking advantage of the near-zero visibility and the roar of the storm, executed a daring tactical maneuver. He attempted to quietly outflank his pursuers along a narrow, slippery mountain trail near a steep granite ridge. According to police tactical analysts, his plan was to drive the Marshal's advance unit into a natural dead end above a precipice more than 200 feet deep, completely cutting off their safe route of retreat. However, the maniac made a fatal mistake that cost him his freedom. He catastrophically underestimated technological progress. While in the year 2022, the massive thermal imaging cameras on rescue helicopters had been unable to locate a living Russell beneath the dense canopy of ancient trees. The police now employed an entirely different arsenal. The assault teams were equipped with the latest compact tactical drones. Fitted with ultra-sensitive high-resolution infrared sensors, they were capable of flying as low as possible, maneuvering with precision between tree trunks despite the squall-force winds and relentless rain. At 7:30 p.m., the operator of one of these drones detected a temperature anomaly on his monitor. Against the backdrop of the cold, rain-drenched blue forest, a bright red thermal glow from a human silhouette flared up. The suspect was sitting, pressed tightly against the wet ground, securely hidden behind a massive granite boulder. The Special Forces unit, having instantly received precise geographic coordinates, moved silently and within minutes surrounded the rock on 3 sides, cutting off any possibility of maneuver. Having been completely cornered and found himself in the direct line of fire of a dozen assault rifles with their laser sights activated, Silas Moore offered no resistance. He slowly emerged from behind the wet rock and obediently raised his empty hands in the air. A blank, utterly deranged smile was frozen on his face, down which raindrops were streaming. As he was roughly subdued and steel handcuffs were fastened on him, he quietly but clearly uttered a short phrase. The police officer's lapel microphones reliably captured every sound of his monotonous voice. "It doesn't matter anymore. My best project has already been successfully completed anyway." The escort immediately led the detainee down the slippery slope to the patrol cars. Meanwhile, one of the forensic investigators, wearing sterile gloves, opened the wet canvas backpack that Moore had thrown to the ground. Among the spare batteries and a coil of rope, the expert felt for an object wrapped in plastic. Unwrapping the package under the cold light of a tactical flashlight, the forensic investigator saw a topographic map of the mountain range. On it, a remote location in the heart of a remote forest, completely unknown to the investigation, had been circled in red marker. It was marked with a bold cross and accompanied by a short handwritten note. Studio number 2, Reserve, casting open. The trial of Silas Moore began on February 15, 2026, at 9 a.m. in the U.S. District Court for the District of West Virginia. The trial instantly captured the nation's attention. According to the court transcripts, the defense's strategy was based on an attempt to have the defendant declared not criminally responsible. The defense attorneys relied on detailed medical reports from independent psychiatrists regarding Moore's severe form of parasocial schizophrenia. They argued to the jury that Silas had completely lost touch with reality. and could not distinguish between the digital illusion he had created and real life. However, the prosecution team dealt a crushing blow to this strategy. Prosecutors, relying on terabytes of decrypted files from the servers in the underground bunker and documented preparations for the kidnapping, indisputably proved the criminal's cold, maniacal calculation. Forensic experts presented receipts for the purchase of 12-inch thick acoustic panels, purchased with cash 8 months before the crime was committed. The prosecution also presented a topographic map marked with the location of the backup studio, seized from Moore's backpack at the time of his arrest, which provided documentary evidence of his clear and well-thought-out plan of action. On April 10th at 2 p.m., the jury returned to the courtroom after 16 hours of continuous closed-door deliberation. Their verdict was unanimous: guilty on all 8 counts of the serious charges. At 3:15 p.m., the federal judge read the final sentence. In accordance with the protocol, he sentenced 42-year-old Silas Moore to life imprisonment in a maximum security federal prison, without any right to early release or appeal. The criminal will serve his sentence in complete isolation in a 64-square-foot concrete cell, permanently deprived of any access to the press, television, or the internet. Exactly 1 year has passed since the dramatic rescue from the karst cave. It is now October 2026. 24-year-old Russell Hood now lives in a small, heavily guarded private home in a quiet neighborhood in the northern part of the state. The exact geographical coordinates of his residence are strictly classified by the police and securely concealed from the press. The area around the house is equipped along its entire perimeter with hidden cameras and infrared motion sensors with an active range of 500 feet. According to official medical reports, Russell is undergoing an extremely intensive daily course of physical and psychological rehabilitation. He has managed to regain lost muscle mass and reach a healthy weight of 165 pounds. However, his body will forever bear the gruesome physical scars of his past. Deep scars from the heavy metal chains that bound his wrists and ankles. Sessions with the state's leading psychotherapists helped him restore his atrophied vocal cords, regain his voice, and partially learn to control the devastating effects of severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Russell made a definitive decision regarding his digital past. He permanently and irrevocably deleted all his social media accounts, officially shut down his channel with thousands of subscribers, and will never again pick up a video camera or even a regular cell phone with a camera lens. The modern technologies that once brought him worldwide fame and recognition nearly became a deadly instrument of his slow demise. On October 20th, at 5 o'clock in the evening, Russell sits motionless in a wicker chair on the wooden porch of his new home. The temperature has dropped to 48 degrees Fahrenheit. A warm plaid blanket lies on his lap. The man silently gazes at the endless autumn forests in the distance, the very same dense stands of trees that he once loved more than anything in the world, and which, for 3 years, had become the backdrop to his worst nightmare. A cold, biting wind ruffles his regrown, now perfectly clean hair. Russell slowly lowers his gaze to his open palms. He stares for a long time at the battered but fully healed pads of his fingers, with which he had desperately carved out a path to safety on the damp limestone walls of the dark cave. He closes his eyes and, for the first time in a long while, takes an incredibly deep, calm breath, filling his lungs with the fresh scent of the real, unadulterated world. But suddenly, at 2 minutes past 5 in the evening, the perfect silence of his safe haven is shattered by a sharp sound. From the depths of the dark forest, exactly 100 feet from his porch, comes the distinctive, melodious song of a bird. Russell instantly opens his eyes and his breath catches. He knows that sound better than his own name. It is the trill of the rare black-throated bunting, the very same bird whose recording Silas Moore played every night over the loudspeakers in the underground bunker, and which has never in history migrated to these northern latitudes.